Welcome to Sex and the Suburbs, the podcast for moms to talk about sex. I'm Kaitlin McGreyes, founder of Be Her Village, and along with me is Heather Simonson, sex therapist and owner of Sea Change Holistic Wellness Center. This podcast is about all the things that don't get talked about. Sex, motherhood, parenting, relationships, and everything in between.
It's like a metronome.
Hey Heather, what are we talking about today?
We are talking. Is that going to keep going?
No, yeah, let me.
Oh,
okay. Okay.
Because I thought it was going to stop.
Let's start over again.
Like
3,
I might
2,
be distracted.
1. What are we talking about today, Heather?
Today we are talking about how to love your body after birth.
We have to figure out how to love it before birth.
Also that. But I think something that's really common is that even as we're growing in pregnancy, I see it all the time, that people have a really hard time in connecting with their bodies and embracing their growth. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, how things have changed, and there might be stretch marks and sagging and what it does to their vulvas.
I was going to say, this is a sex podcast, so it's not just like love your body, positivity, which I love all of that good stuff. We're going to specifically talk about vulvas and vaginas and vaginal tears and stitches and scar tissue and pain and fear. I'm just describing my own experience at this point, but I'm hoping that we're going to touch on all of that because I feel like as a mother and as a doula and as someone who works with mothers, like the word vaginal tear is, or the phrase vaginal tear is one of the worst phrases. Like I'm imagining the people listening to this are having like a gut reaction. Like there's something changing in their body as they hear those words. Those are awful, awful words.
Yeah.
And maybe we should find new words for it, or maybe we should just find out how to not do it so much. But it's something many people who give birth deal with. Some have a little bit, and some are really disabled by a full-blown tear. And for anyone who's listening and doesn't know, there's degrees of tears, first, second, third, fourth. And yeah, I think it's like, if we're going to talk about body love and sex, we have to talk about vaginal tearing.
We have to talk about vaginal tearing.
Yeah. All right. So where do we even start? Where do we start? How do you, let's start with vaginal tearing. Which is, oh God, we have to find a better way to phrase that. But like, I'm going to start with just what I always do, which is just sharing my own experience, and then we can go from there.
Sounds good.
I had, because it's the only thing I can speak to, right? I had a 2nd degree vaginal tear with my second birth, which was my VBAC birth. And what that basically means is, and I don't know specifically, but what that basically means is that the skin was involved, the muscles were involved of the perineum and the vagina, but not the rectum, the anus, or anything of the anal sphincter. So it's pretty common, I think, to have a 1st and a 2nd degree tear. I didn't know this until I was a doula, but you actually, they take stats. New York State collects stats on 3rd and 4th degree tears. So if there's a 3rd or a 4th degree tear at the birth, the midwife or the doctor has to report it to the state.
And what's the intention of that?
Probably just having an idea of, I mean, I think it's a good thing. I think it's like, my guess.
Risk management, I would think.
I think they just want to see, like, because a 3rd or a 4th degree tear is damage. It's not something that's going to heal on its own.
Are you able to speak to the differences between?
Not from a medical point, because I don't have that experience, but I can, or that training, but I can speak as a doula. I just know that so 3rd degree tear involves the anal sphincter, but it's not completely through.
Oh my goodness.
But the 4th degree tear is literally from your vaginal opening through to your anus. It's a very bad, big, damaging thing that takes months and months and months of healing and restoring, and it's not something you want, and it is something that people experience. So I think that there is some normalcy, right, of tearing or having injury to your tissues, because
injury was the word I was thinking of, by the way.
Tearing, yeah.
Vulval injuries.
Yeah, tearing,
right? Because is it
horrific.
I guess it can be in the vagina, right? But
yes. Oh, there's all different kinds of
tears.
There's like I don't know, but you can tear in the inside of the vagina, and then you can tear the perineum. You can tear. You can have injury to your labia.
I think injury is the way to go.
Injury, because tear is awful. It sounds like you're ripping paper. Anyway, so I think that there is a normal range of injury, and I have seen women who are like birthing in the water completely unassisted. There's a midwife there, but nobody's touching her, nobody's forcing her, and she's easing her baby out. And there's just, sometimes you just have a big baby, sometimes babies have a hand by their face, which kind of like expands their diameter to get out. So it's okay and normal sometimes, but I think the third and fourth degree is like just something has gone wrong. Something has not happened correctly. But regardless of your injury and your recovery, I think it's just like scary to have sex after giving birth, and giving birth both ways, because I had a C-section with my first and I was terrified to have sex afterwards, and I had a vaginal injury or vulval injury, perineal injury with my second, also scared, and my third I had sex after 5 weeks. We had sex 2 times by my 6-week postpartum visit. So I guess I was less scared for that one.
Well, you had experience.
Yeah. So how do we, for someone who's postpartum and sitting there with their newborn and a husband that's, as my husband and I like to joke, barking up the tree.
Or a partner, right?
Or a partner. I'm sorry. Yes,
that's
I'm always
okay.
making it about me. Yes. Somebody who has a partner who's quote unquote barking up the tree and starting to feel a little antsy about becoming intimate again, but who has been through, even if it's a quote unquote normal birth, like there's trauma just in the act of birth, right? So how do we get back in touch with our bodies? How would you counsel someone who's sitting here saying, I just had an injury and stitches, and my doctor says I'm okay to go, but I'm really nervous, and and it hurt the one time we tried to do it. Like, where do we go from there?
A bunch of things come to mind.
Okay, good.
I think the first thing that comes to mind is that regardless of whether or not your doctor tells you that you're good to go, if you don't feel ready for that yet, there are many other ways to be sexual and to be connected with your partner that don't necessarily involve penetration. And so I think that we can kind of expand our horizons a bit and what pleasure looks like and what connection looks like, and even like what the quote unquote word having sex looks like. It doesn't have to involve that. And so I think we, to some degree, need to have a sense of readiness, right? And some people might never really feel ready, and then that's like a whole different ball game. But so I wouldn't let that necessarily pressure anybody and feeling like, okay, it's the 6 weeks, all right, we got to get going. Like if you still feel like you're healing, or you are feeling disconnected to your body, or there are things that you can definitely do. And I think that one thing is acceptance. I mean, it sounds so simple.
It does.
Right? Like,
it does sound simple.
And it's not easy. It is not an easy thing to do at all. But I think accepting that our bodies have gone through this, I'm going to use the word sea change. Hey, right? But that's what it is. A transformation as large as the sea. Like, that's what happens.
Yes, it is a transformation as large as the sea. Can we have a t-shirt with that on it? That is exactly what it is.
Yes, in fact, I just got prices for them this week.
Coming soon to a website near you.
Exactly.
Oh, I love it.
Bibs, onesies, t-shirts, and all.
As large
masks
as the
and all.
sea.
Yes, that's what sea change means.
Yeah.
And so that's why I named the place Sea Change, right? Because that's all what we're about. And so, but isn't that literally what pregnancy is? Mm-hmm. Not even forgetting about just birth and parenting, but just the transformation that our bodies go through is literally a sea change.
Even if you take out the emotional and the daily day in and day out, literally just segment what your body goes through, and that is a lifetime of changed
It
in
is.
one day.
And some
For 1
people
year.
really embrace it and, find it really
I am
beautiful.
not one of those people.
I am totally one of those people. I
mean, I am, but
love-
like for myself, I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
no. So, and
I'm
some
leaking,
people don't.
and it hurts, and all the things
I get
hurt,
it.
all the things are leaking, everything is lumpy. And I haven't slept. It was really difficult.
I'm sorry you went through that.
I know. It's okay. I mean, it's why I'm here.
That's why we're here.
But it's
to talk
also
about it.
like, I'm glad that there are people that embrace things. Like,
I loved being pregnant. I mean, there were definitely difficult things about it, but I absolutely loved it. But not everybody does. People have a really difficult time, and their bodies changing, and the expansion of their bodies, especially when we're in a culture of like that we should be
constantly shrinking
small.
ourselves. Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And here we are, like the natural way of pregnancy is for us to expand. And I talk about, and to take up more space. And I talk about that in my classes fairly often of like, we need to be embracing this. We are literally like an incubator. We're creating another human life. Like it's the most incredible gift.
Mind blowing.
It's
I've been in this work
mind-blowing.
I've been a mother for 8 years. I've been in this work for 6+ years. Every birth I attend, I am just like C-section or vaginal, although the vaginal is like spectacularly, miraculous. Like you created a whole human being with your genitals.
Yes, you did.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
That's why when I do puberty workshops, it's called Puberty Pride, and I tell them exactly what it means, that your body is now changing in a way that enables you to one day, if you choose, to have a baby. And that is like a superpower. Beyond. Right? And I know that might be hard for people who maybe have a difficult time conceiving to hear these kinds of things, right? But that's, what the intention is of our body. And it doesn't mean also that we all have to have babies if you choose. Like
or that's the only way to have a baby.
Or that's
to have a baby biologically. There's lots to be celebrated. And yet we can't let that take away from the fact that it is insane that our bodies are capable of doing this, right? And so when we think about this body after birth, that's one thing that I've used for myself. It's one thing that I've counseled my clients on of like, think about like every stretch mark, and I have plenty of them, right? Or your belly looking a certain way and different than it did before, or your vulva looking a certain way, or even your vagina feeling differently in sex. Yeah. Can we like get into the like real nitty gritty of that? Because I feel like that's what I would want to hear if I was listening to this podcast. Like I love all the like bigger themes, but also like it felt really different for me.
It did.
Oh my God. So
Can you say?
Oh, I can say in detail. Are you ready? You're going to take notes? So
it's being recorded. I don't have to.
Broadcast publicly. This is great. So I had a C-section with my first, which you would think like would make vaginal sex afterwards fine, But first of all, there was tons of fear just because like my whole body had gone through this whole
major abdominal surgery,
just changes and surgery, and there was also, and this is like kind of attached to my thought right now, is like there was also this new function for my body. Like before it was just my body and I used it for sex, but then suddenly it was like breastfeeding. So the idea of like switching into sex mode was weird for me. It was something that was new to have to like toggle between nurturing and parenting and feeding this little human versus pleasuring and deriving pleasure from it. But I remember there was just dryness. It just hurt.
Right.
It didn't hurt like pain. There wasn't muscular pain. It was like, it just felt like, and I don't want to be too graphic, but I do also want to get my point across. Like, it felt like when he was inside of me, like, not sandpaper, but it was thinking. Like, it just wasn't like gooey and looby and slippery and slidey and easy the way it had always been. And it kind of didn't matter how much foreplay or how much lube. Like, it just felt different. And I am the type of person, and this is kind of why I'm doing Be Her Village and all the things I'm doing now. I'm the type of person, I didn't have someone to ask about that. I didn't have
right.
a sex therapist. I didn't have this podcast. I didn't have a best friend to like, hey, this is really weird, what, you know? And so I just powered through it, and sex was kind of a chore, but it was something, you know, it just didn't feel good. And my husband and I communicated a lot about it, and he tried to go slow when he needed to go slow. Like, we were very communicative about it, and I'm grateful that I have that relationship with him where we, you know, he was going slow with me and always feeling awful about if he was making me uncomfortable. But I just kind of powered through. And then the way I figured out what was actually going on was that at 10 months postpartum with my first, I ovulated for the first time. And I knew that I ovulated because my husband and I had sex, and it like felt like before. It was like, oh my God, it's pre-baby sex. It was like, oh, it was just so good again. It was slippery, you know? And then I got my period, my first postpartum period 2 weeks after that. And I recognized and realized later, only later, that I think the cause of all that was because I was breastfeeding, and it like made these changes in hormones that caused that condition. But I didn't, like, I was in tons of breastfeeding groups. I was in mom groups. Nobody was talking about the sex. Nobody was talking about that. Well, neither does really
your OBGYN unless they're asking, or your, I don't know about midwives. I didn't have a midwife if they really talk about that, but
my midwife didn't
talk about it, right?
Yeah.
They ask you about your birth control.
Yes, they did that.
Right?
So at least
that's usually that. But they don't ask about pelvic floor health.
She did ask if I had sex at our 6-week appointment. This was my home birth midwife. And I said, well, we've had sex twice so far. And she was like, check. She checked off whatever that was on her form. But for my midwives, I think I might have told you the story in a different podcast. But my midwives didn't read, the midwife group that I was at, they didn't read my form. So at my 2-week post-surgery check, they were supposed to look at my scar, and instead she did a cervical exam and like jammed herself up there and was like, I can't reach your cervix. She was all the way, and I was like in so much pain. I was like, oh,
Kaitlin.
And she was like, oh, you had a C-section? And I was like, yeah, did you not read my chart? She was awful. I mean, the whole group was awful.
Oh,
so
no.
It's part of the horrors of the first one. But no, I don't think midwives are talking about it in the sense of like, does it feel good?
No.
You know, I don't think people are having these conversations.
Practices need sex therapists or sexuality educators in every practice. And I know some people who,
right?
yes,
we
are.
Something like that, Heather? Like training all the birth workers?
It's my plan.
Okay, good.
It's
you let me know what you need.
Plan.
I'm in. You can come to it for all the Be Her Village providers.
That would be amazing, Kaitlin. We definitely need it. And I know some professionals who work within practices, and it's very successful because I know they don't really have the time to get into all of this stuff, and I understand it, or the training necessarily.
What if someone says, oh, well, sex hurts? Then it's like, oh, okay, sorry. You know, they don't necessarily have the tools.
Right. And one of the things when you ask me, like, what can we be doing about this? Like, yes, one of those things is acceptance and kind of being in awe of what our bodies have just done. And every stretch mark, every scar, every even twinge of discomfort that somebody has, of just reminder, like, it's there because your body did something amazing. And like kind of just honoring that. So, but then the other piece, and the second thing that came to mind, was seeing a physical therapist for two things. One is for your pelvic floor health, because a lot of people winds up with some type of maybe pelvic floor dysfunction, which is going to affect libido. It's going to affect how it feels. It can be painful. And even especially if you've had a traumatic birth, right? All of the contractions of like the muscles of like, there's just so many things. And also, and I know we're not talking necessarily about like the body image overall, but so many women wind up having diastasis.
Yes.
And OBGYNs, and again, my I didn't have a midwife, but like, I don't think they really assess for things like that. They don't talk about pain. They don't, and even if there is something, they might get diagnosed with something like, you know, dyspareunia or vulvodynia or like something along those lines. But then like, what do they do with that? Right. And so it's rare that someone will be referred to a pelvic floor physical therapist.
And it should be routine. I just want to point out
6-week visits. Everyone should see one.
Pelvic floor dysfunction, but even if this is what I've learned in my conversations with all of the amazing pelvic floor therapists that we work with, is that even if you don't have dysfunction, your pelvic floor needs restoration and recovery.
Yes, rejuvenation.
Because birth is, I don't want to say it's traumatic, but it's an event. No matter how you give birth, pregnancy is an event. And we need several different types of recovery. And that's where your 6-week visit is not, it's the end all be all. It's not even the beginning. We need hands-on and people surrounding us. We need sex therapy. We need pelvic floor therapy. We need postpartum doula. I mean, we could go into what we need, but we need a whole lot more than just a 15-minute visit with an OB that does a vaginal exam and tells you to go on your way and we'll see you next year for your pap smear. Like, that is failing women.
It is exactly failing women. And that's why I really think we need to be advocating and educating and doing whatever we need to do to make this part of every birthing woman's postpartum care. Like, you go for your 6-week checkup. Like, go see a pelvic floor therapist. It's not going to hurt. I mean, you may not feel good, but it's not any worse than going to an OBGYN or a midwife to go get examined. It's like the same kind of thing. And you should get assessed. And then you have all these women who might have some type of dysfunction, whether it's a hypertonic pelvic floor or a hypotonic pelvic floor, who are then peeing on themselves, which who feels sexy when they're peeing on themselves?
Just that's a factor, right? Very small segment of the population, probably.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, when I don't do my exercises that I know I need to do, and we're not talking about just Kegels, right? Because that's just a very superficial exercise. We're talking about full 3-layered pelvic floor muscle exercises. It still might happen to me. And then that's not sexy. It doesn't make me feel sexy. It doesn't make me feel like I want to get intimate with my partner. It makes me feel like I need to go take a shower before every single time. It's one little piece of the puzzle here, but it's a real factor. And many women deal with incontinence, whether it's because of the tearing. Right? Or even if it's just pelvic floor dysfunction.
Definitely. Yeah. So when we have someone who is nervous or has tried having sex and it's uncomfortable, what are the things that they can do in addition to pelvic floor work and sex therapy and reaching out to their midwives and OBs and trying to get medical answers? What are the things that they can do at home with their partners or at home by themselves? What is our, hey, go try this? Or, I don't know, I guess I just want to, how do we reacquaint ourselves with our body? Because I feel like there's a learning curve. There's a whole new person. There's a whole new person being the baby, but your body is so different. How do we move forward, even with pain or even without pain, but just a ton of trepidation? How do we kind of feel into ourselves a little bit?
I think 2 things come to mind. Okay. One is get a mirror, open it up.
All right.
And look. I mean, really look at yourself. Look at all of its parts. Look at the hair if you have any. Look at your clitoris. Look at the layers.
We should be doing that before birth, and just anyone who's listening should be
100%.
If you haven't already.
And I'm going to be totally honest, and I haven't shared tons of personal stuff, not for any reason other than just I haven't, but I will. And my youngest is 10 years old, and I'm not going to lie and tell you that it was a long time before I was afraid to look. I really felt kind of disconnected because it was, I wouldn't say a traumatic birth, although I think Jackie, my doula, would have said that it was, because I did have some bleeding and the doctor kind of left me hanging there bleeding and went to another birth, and I was there with my legs open and whatever, and so she was mortified and wanted to lodge a complaint and everything like that.
Jackie Levine?
She
was your doula?
Yeah.
I did not know that. I love Jackie.
You didn't. You didn't know that?
I knew you were connected to her. I didn't know she was your doula.
She's my doula. She's the one who designed my logo.
I know.
She's the inspiration for this place, and I'm getting the sign made for the studio in her name.
I have something she made for Annabelle. She hand did for Annabelle hanging in her room.
We still
have
ours.
And for the boys, too.
We still have ours. Ella still has hers up. in her room.
Annabelle May, it's like something about skipping through her garden. I don't know.
I'm going to take a picture of mine. I'm going to send it to you.
Okay, same.
I'm going to start to cry, but I'm going to try not to.
Okay.
So, yes, Jackie Levine. And so it, again, like, I don't feel traumatized by it, but like, it could have very well gone that way. But, I felt really disconnected to my vulva at the time. And I just shared that I still deal with some incontinence sometimes, especially if I'm not keeping up with my exercises. And so, like, I don't feel the same way about even my genitals, even now. And so I would say, like, within this past year was probably the first time that I actually taken a mirror myself and looked. And my first thought was like, wow, that's not so bad. I have to be honest.
I love
literally,
that was your response.
That was literally, I was like, oh, wow. Like,
There's a lot of hoopla about this thing that's actually not so scary looking.
It's not as bad as I had made it out to be. Like, and it reminds me of the vagina monologues, which I used to perform with an amazing group.
Too.
You did?
In college, yes.
I did. Did we talk about
orgasm on stage.
Oh my God, I did that one too.
Parents and boyfriend and brother and yeah. Oh, we did not talk about that, but I love that we're discovering
we are
going to
talk about
the air about the vagina monologues.
I did it for years with a traveling troupe. I love them and miss all of them. Are my vagina ladies. So, but like I felt like one of the monologues described it as like this deep, dark, dingy place, and like that's, to be honest, and I'm admitting this even as a sex therapist, like that's kind of how I felt. And when I looked in the mirror, I was like, oh, it's kind of pretty. Like, it kind of looks like the George O'Keeffe things and, like, the pictures that I show my clients and, like, the, and I was like, oh, it's not so bad. And so, like, so that's really one thing. And to notice that the changes, if you have looked at it, if you've never looked at it before, you have to know that there's no one right way. I think that's another problem that we have in how we feel about our body image, in particular to our genitalia, right? Is that, where do we learn about sex from? Various places. Many people learn about it from porn. And so, right? And I'm not knocking porn. It can have a good, positive place in somebody's life. But we get this image that it's supposed to look a certain way, right? And I used the word rejuvenation before. And there are these places that do this, like vaginal rejuvenation and do surgery and like all these things, which, I'm not going to judge about it. But again, acceptance, right? And so, but we are all supposed to look different, just like everything else about us. Every vulva looks different. And I think that that's a really important piece to what we're talking about, to know that we're not supposed to look one way, right? Our labia are all different shapes and sizes. The coloring is all different shapes and sizes. Like, it's supposed to look different. And I think if we can kind of imprint that in our brains a little bit, then maybe we'll have some more acceptance and love for the way that we look.
I love it. I'm looking up. I know you're seeing me look at my phone. I couldn't remember the name of it. There's an Instagram account I've been following for years. It's called the Vulva Gallery.
Ooh.
And it's literally, you can just like scroll through it if you want while we're sitting here. It's literally just somebody who gets pictures of people's vulvas and just draws them and paints them. And it's so cool because it's, first of all, it's actually quite beautiful, but it also just shows exactly what you just said. There's so many ways for a vulva to look. There's no one right way or wrong way.
That is beautiful.
It's amazing. And they do like the copy, the text that goes along with the posts are very empowering and positive and all of that. So I did a similar thing with my vulva after my second birth, where I had torn. I had an injury. And I had stitches. And I just remember the reason why I felt called to look is because I felt the amount of pain that I was experiencing. It was short-lived and very like hyper local versus my C-section, which was like extended and kind of my whole middle of my body. So this was just hyper focused to my perineum, but I just felt like things were going horribly wrong down there. It just felt injured. It felt painful when I wasn't taking, the ibuprofen. And so I just felt called to like look down there. And what I found was similar to you. And this was like a week postpartum with a vaginal injury.
Wow, that's
brave.
Injury.
It was very brave.
That's very brave.
But I didn't regret it.
Good for you.
My reaction was actually, wow, that looks super normal and fine. And it was reassuring to me because I think I was in a lot of pain, and it just, the whole area just felt like, holy shit, a baby just came out of me. It just felt a little overwhelming. And instead, it just looked the way it has, like, it's not like I've never looked, it's just looked the way it has always looked. And it didn't look torn apart, and it didn't look injured. All the stitches were inside. It was all folded in really nicely. It looked completely normal. And it was surprisingly reassuring to me because it didn't match how I was feeling, but it helped me feel like, okay, this is going to be okay.
See, I wish I had done it 10 years ago, which I didn't, which is a terrible thing for me to say that I didn't do it for myself. But, But this is why we learn and share with other people. That's right. You should look. That's right. Because, I never really thought that I felt that badly about it. It was just like kind of this thought or feeling, I guess, in the back of my mind. And so, but we should postpartum. We should teach our girls to do that. Mm-hmm. In fact, I remember...
I'm going to teach my daughter so many things. She has no idea what's coming.
I remember when my daughter did it. We had gone to an OB appointment for my son, and she came with me. And I walked in the house, and she was in the living room, and she was there with a mirror. And she was pretending that she was, like, at the doctor's office with her, like, feet in stirrups or whatever. And then she must have pretended that she had like 50 babies with her baby dolls for like the next, I don't even know, 3 months or something like that. Mm-hmm. It was the cutest thing. But I was so unbelievably proud of her. We totally validated her. We just had to tell her that she needed to do it in privacy in her own bedroom and not in the living room. So
yes, that's always a thing to talk about.
Yeah.
What was I just going to say? Oh, so I want to just push this little assignment that we have, or this suggestion of an assignment, to go and get a mirror and get some private time and look. But I also want to encourage people to touch.
Well, that was going to be my second thing.
Go for it.
We are so connected today.
We didn't talk about any of this, everyone, by the way.
We did not. But that was, I said there were going to be two things, right? The first one was to look, and the second one is self-pleasure, right? Like if you're trepidatious about getting back with your partner and
figure it out
just
on your own.
Do it on your own and be gentle and loving, and like it doesn't even have to be like you're fingering or going inside or anything.
There's lots to do outside.
There's lots to do outside, but you can literally even just take the palm of your hand and just place it right over your vulva and kind of like hold yourself and just breathe, which is honestly a very beautiful practice. Like it can bring people to tears of like just that safety and lovingness of like, it doesn't even have to be about sex. It's just like you're kind of honor, and I'm like sitting here cupping my hand as I'm doing it. Not that anyone else can see me, right? But like, it's like a very beautiful thing to do. And I think that that's just one way to, even if it's like, I do Reiki. So like, even if it's like, you're just sending that space, like love and light and healing and like all the good stuff in the world, especially after this incredible thing that it just did, right? And then just explore, see what kinds of, pressure feels good, or what kind of modalities of touch feels good. Some people like using their fingernails or their fingertips. Some people don't. Some people like, one finger, two fingers, no fingers, the heel of your hands. Like, people do all sorts of different things. So like, just explore, breathe, take your time. And don't even necessarily make it about the orgasm, right? Which we've talked about also in one of our podcasts, and I'm sure we'll talk much more about those too.
Of course.
But like, don't make it about that. Just make it about learning what your body feels like and accepting your body for exactly where it's at. And kind of, again, being in awe of its capabilities. And so that's part of the problem with our society, is that we have goal-oriented sex, whether it's self-pleasure or partnered sex, that it becomes about this big O. And even though, who doesn't want one?
Of course.
But there's so many other things that we can be exploring and enjoying. And we need to become embodied. And so whether it's through that, or to be honest, not off topic, but like exercise, fitness, like doing anything else that's just embodied is going to help you reconnect in that way.
Absolutely. I also just want to add in, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit, that while you have your mirror, because all of that sounds like a lot of fun, to be honest with you, but while you have your mirror, I think there's this idea that like the male physical body like changes significantly and the female body doesn't upon arousal. But I feel like you can, while you're playing, like
Kaitlin.
notice if it's redder or plumper, or like just notice.
So look and touch at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, we can multitask. We're moms.
Yeah.
That's what we do. I could probably answer an email while I do that.
Oh, good. Okay, let's keep it a mindful practice.
Okay, nobody email me.
No email. No phones.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's like all part of the learning. Like not just learning what she looks like, or that's what I always refer to her.
I
like
do
she.
too.
Okay, she doesn't have a name or anything. She's just she.
Which naming it is also very good. In Tantra, we call it a yoni.
A yoni, yes, I've heard of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my a friend of my husband's is a lesbian, and her wife had their first baby, and they called him Yonatan, and they call him Yoni. And when I found out that Yoni is also for vagina, I texted them, and they were like, "We know that now. We didn't know that when we named him."
They
I
did
said, "How
really?
perfect is that?" You named him Yoni.
That is interesting. I love it.
Yeah.
I want to meet them.
Okay, we'll make that happen.
So looking at the same time, I think that's a really excellent point, Kaitlin, of like being able to look at the different changes in your genitalia as you become aroused. That's brilliant.
Cool. That's what I'm here for.
So that's our homework.
All right. I like that homework. I like that a lot. I'm going to do it.
Me too.
So what, just like a regular, like a makeup mirror, like a handheld, like something you can...
I mean, if it's that small, I mean, I would suggest probably, if you have something bigger, only because if you are touching...
That's why I'm just like thinking.
Whatever you have, use whatever you have. If you have something larger so that you can kind of play and see at the same time, right? Because otherwise you're going to be like having to sit up to see it or something like that.
Can we like squat over it, or it's best to be laying back in your bed?
I think whatever most is comfortable for you, and I think that there might be also. I'm also a layer, and I've used like my makeup mirror, which could be interesting because that also has like the magnifier on it.
Oh my word! I am sexually open, but I don't know if I need a magnifier.
It really, but you're talking about like seeing real changes, right? So it could be. It's. I'm just.
I don't know that any of my body parts need magnifier.
Oh, they all do. They all do. So, and that also like has a stand. So like if you have something like that, then you don't have to hold it. And they usually angle. I'm not, smart. I mean, you can go out and get them for Bed Bath & Beyond for $30 or whatever it is, or Amazon, I guess these days.
Yeah.
Right. But anything that you have, it will suffice. Awesome. But anything that you can do that's hands-free would be even that much better. Perfect. And I'm sure you can use pillows and things to also prop it so you don't actually have to hold it also.
I love it. Yeah, this is really good. All right, so everyone out there in podcast land who's listening to this, report back to us. Email us, Kaitlin@BeHerVillage.com, Heather at SeaChangeHolisticWellnessCenter.com. Is it
It's HWC. Yep.
Heather at SeaChangeHWC.com.
That's it.
Or tag us if you're brave and willing to share. Tag us
brave.
on Instagram and Facebook. Join the Be Her Village for the Mamas mom group that we have, our Facebook group. And just like let us know, because I'm so curious to hear how this goes for everyone. Excellent. Thank you so much for listening. And Heather, thank you so much for having this amazing ongoing conversation.
Thanks, Kaitlin. Thank you, everyone.
All right. See you next time. Bye.